Somewhere on this earth, there is a sword that has not been seen in over 75 years, a sword considered by experts, historians and collectors worldwide to be the single most beautiful object ever created by human hands, a sword worth more money than most nations could afford, a sword that vanished at the end of the most devastating war in human history and has never been found again. The Honjo Masamune, 700 years of extraordinary history, gone. Welcome to Sword Legends, the channel dedicated to the greatest blades ever forged. Subscribe right now, hit that like button, drop "find it" in the comments, because today we are telling the complete story of the sword the world lost. Most lost treasures are lost because nobody cared enough to protect them. The Honjo Masamune is different. This sword was protected for over 700 years, passed carefully from hand to hand, from legendary samurai warriors to powerful shogunates to Japanese emperors, treated with a reverence normally reserved for sacred religious objects. And then, in the chaos of World War II's final days, it disappeared. Not stolen by an enemy army, not destroyed in battle, not lost at sea. It was handed to an American soldier by a Japanese family following surrender orders and was never seen again. Today, on Sword Legends, we are telling every chapter of this extraordinary story, from creation to disappearance, from legend to mystery. To understand the Honjo Masamune, you must first understand the man who created it, Gorō Nyūdō Masamune. Active in early 14th century Japan, Masamune is universally considered the greatest swordsmith in all of human history. Not the greatest Japanese swordsmith, the greatest swordsmith, period. His blades achieved properties that modern metallurgists still struggle to fully explain, simultaneously harder and more flexible than anything comparable, possessing a crystalline steel structure that required centuries of scientific advancement to understand. Masamune worked during the Kamakura period, when Japanese sword-making had already reached extraordinary heights and elevated it further still. Contemporary accounts describe Masamune working alone, fasting, praying and purifying himself before each blade, treating the creation of a sword as a sacred spiritual act rather than a craft. Japanese emperors commissioned his blades, shogunates treasured them as national symbols, and centuries after his death, his name became synonymous with perfection itself. Now, what made the Honjo Masamune specifically so extraordinary among all of Masamune's creations? The answer is everything. The Honjo Masamune was a tachi, a long curved sword designed for mounted combat, measuring approximately 80 centimeters of blade length. But its physical dimensions tell only a fraction of the story. The blade itself was described by every historical source that recorded it as possessing a visual quality that went beyond conventional beauty, a surface that seemed to capture and transform light in ways that ordinary steel could not replicate. The hamon, the temper line running along the blade, was described in historical documents as resembling flowing water, perfectly natural, perfectly fluid, perfectly alive. The blade's geometry, its curve, thickness and taper, represented the absolute pinnacle of Japanese swordsmithing achievement. Every element was flawless, every proportion was perfect. In over 700 years of examination by Japan's most knowledgeable sword experts, nobody found a single flaw. The Honjo Masamune did not sit quietly in a museum for 7 centuries. It lived, it was carried, it was fought over, it was won and lost in battle. Its first documented owner was a powerful 14th century samurai named Honjo Shigenaga, who gave the sword its name after receiving it in battle. According to historical accounts, Honjo survived a strike from this very blade during combat, and was so moved by its extraordinary quality that he made recovering it his personal mission. He succeeded. The sword then passed through a succession of the most powerful figures in Japanese history, eventually entering the collection of the Tokugawa Shogunate, the ruling military government that controlled Japan for over 250 years. During the Tokugawa era, the Honjo Masamune was designated a national treasure, preserved with extraordinary care as one of the most important objects in all of Japan. For 7 centuries, it never left Japanese hands, until 1945, December 1945. World War II had ended 4 months earlier. Japan was under American occupation. General MacArthur's forces had issued an order. All Japanese citizens were required to surrender weapons, including swords, to occupation authorities. The Tokugawa family, the descendants of Japan's last shogunate, complied with the order. They surrendered 15 swords to American authorities at the Majiro police station in Tokyo. Among those 15 swords, the Honjo Masamune. The swords were received by an American soldier identified only as Sergeant Colby Bimore, a name that subsequent investigators have struggled to verify or trace. The swords were taken, and they were never seen again. No official record of their destination was ever found. No museum received them, no collector documented acquiring them. The greatest sword ever made, surrendered by a grieving family following occupation orders, simply vanished into the hands of a soldier nobody can identify, and has not been seen since. Is the Honjo Masamune still out there? The answer, based on current evidence, is almost certainly yes. Here is what we know. The sword was not destroyed. There is no documentation of its destruction. It was not officially transferred to any American museum or institution. Extensive record searches have confirmed this. It was not returned to Japan. The Japanese government has been actively seeking it since the 1990s. The most credible theory among researchers is that Sergeant Colby Bimore, or someone connected to him, kept the sword as a personal war trophy, not understanding what he was holding. American soldiers returning from the Pacific Theater brought back thousands of Japanese swords as souvenirs, most stored in attics, basements, and garages, by families who never realized their significance. The Honjo Masamune could be sitting in an American home right now, in a box, in a closet, completely unrecognized. What is the Honjo Masamune worth today? The honest answer, more than any number can express. Here is the context that explains why. The finest authenticated Masamune blades that have appeared at auction in recent decades have achieved prices between $500,000 and $1,000,000, and those are ordinary Masamune works. The Honjo Masamune is not an ordinary Masamune work. It is considered his masterpiece, the single greatest example of his extraordinary craft, a sword that served as a national treasure of Japan for centuries. Japanese cultural authorities have stated that the Honjo Masamune is, essentially, priceless, a cultural artifact of such extraordinary significance that conventional monetary valuation is inadequate. Private collector estimates from specialist sources suggest that if the Honjo Masamune appeared at auction today, it could realistically achieve between $50,000 and $100,000, $100 million, for a sword made by one man 700 years ago, and now the verdict that this entire video has been building toward. Is the Honjo Masamune truly the most beautiful sword ever made? Here is what the historical record tells us. In over 700 years of examination by Japan's most knowledgeable sword experts, no authenticated flaw was ever identified in this blade. In over 700 years of comparison against every other Japanese sword ever produced, the Honjo Masamune was consistently ranked above all competitors. In modern assessments by both Eastern and Western sword experts, the consensus remains the same. No sword ever produced, in any tradition, in any country, in any period of history, has been more consistently described as perfect. Not more powerful, not more famous, more perfect. The Honjo Masamune was not just the most beautiful Japanese sword, it was the most beautiful object ever produced by human craftsmanship, and it is lost, somewhere on this earth, waiting to be found. And there you have it, the complete story of the lost Honjo Masamune, fully explained, historically documented, and definitively analysed. From the extraordinary genius of Masamune himself, to 700 years of legendary ownership, to its heartbreaking disappearance in December 1945, to the ongoing search that continues today. This sword is not just a historical artifact, it is the greatest mystery in the entire history of human craftsmanship, and it is still out there, somewhere. Now I want to hear from you. Where do you think the Honjo Masamune is today? Drop your theory in the comments right now. I read every single one. If this story moved you, smash that like button and subscribe to Sword Legends immediately, because we have more extraordinary sword stories, legendary blade histories, and ancient weapons mysteries arriving every single week. See you in the next one.